The current trajectory of the Indian economy suggests that its nominal GDP will nearly double in size before the end of the decade. This chart tracks global GDP rankings to 2030, projecting India to reach $7.3 trillion. Following this curve, India overtakes both Germany and Japan, becoming the third largest economy. This requires maintaining a 10% nominal compound annual growth rate over 5 years. This momentum is the result of a series of structural shifts: tax unification, a new bankruptcy code, and a focus on domestic manufacturing, policies that are only now beginning to yield their full macroeconomic effect. However, maintaining this velocity requires the economy to function under extreme conditions, balancing rapid technological adoption against significant internal vulnerabilities. The $7.3 trillion figure represents a theoretical maximum, the output of an economy being pushed to its structural limits. The foundational input for the Scraup model is the workforce. By 2030, India's working age population will reach its peak at nearly 69% of the total population. This population shift is driving mass urbanization. To house this labor force, India must support over 50 cities with populations exceeding 1 million people. Supporting this density requires a total expansion of physical logistics. Projects like Bharatmala are adding 100,000 kilometers of new highways to ensure goods can move as fast as the workers themselves. New high-speed rail corridors, like the one shown here, are being built to bridge the distance between megacities, providing the connectivity required for integrated economic zones. While the physical infrastructure moves people, the digital public infrastructure organizes the economy. This digital layer integrates hundreds of millions of citizens into the formal financial system. UPI transactions are expected to hit 200 billion annually by 2030, turning street-level commerce into the data points of a trillion-dollar digital economy. The $7.3 trillion engine relies on this specific alignment: a massive young population supported by the physical and digital tools necessary to remain productive. This chart illustrates the sectoral breakdown for the 2030 projection. Services remain the primary driver, at 55%, while manufacturing expands to a full quarter. The services sector is transitioning to high-value tech, with AI contributing $550 billion and fintech reaching $200 billion. But the services sector cannot absorb the entire rural labor force. To reach the $7.3 trillion target, the manufacturing sector has to scale its contribution to 25% of the total output. External factors are rapidly accelerating this shift. Global companies looking to diversify their production away from China are increasingly viewing India as the primary alternative for large-scale industrial bases. Government incentives are turning this interest into physical production. Annual foreign direct investment is expected to reach $100 billion as electronics and hardware manufacturing move into domestic plants. These industrial shifts are reinforced by geopolitical alliances. Partnerships with the US, Japan, and Australia are helping to secure India's role as a critical hub in the global supply chain. This combination of policy and alignment makes manufacturing the fastest-growing part of the model, particularly in electric vehicles, the pharmaceutical sector, and precision electronics. The $7.3 trillion economy functions on a dual-track system: a service sector capturing global tech capital, and a manufacturing sector employing the domestic labor pool. This model faces a critical internal conflict. The same automation and AI driving GDP growth are simultaneously threatening the stability of the labor market. This visualizes the technology deficit. While the economy needs roles for a 600 million-strong labor force, automation displaces up to 30 million low-skilled jobs. The displacement is targeted. Routine manufacturing could lose 10 million to robotics, while AI chatbots threaten millions in services and retail. The concentration of high-paying tech roles relative to displaced manual labor suggests the Gini coefficient, the measure of income inequality, will widen to 0.45. This wealth gap is reflected in the data. By 2030, the top 10% of earners are expected to hold 55% of national wealth. This inequality creates financial friction. When wealth is concentrated, credit flows to smaller businesses can freeze, potentially leading to a rise in non-performing assets within the shadow banking sector. This labor imbalance is a systemic risk. It generates high GDP numbers while potentially hollowing out the consumer base needed to sustain long-term demand. The second variable in the stress test is climate friction. Projections for 2030 show a potential 1.5 degrees Celsius rise in average temperatures across the region. This temperature increase places a direct economic burden on the agricultural sector through more frequent heat waves and disruptions to the monsoon cycle. Agricultural lands across 200 districts are facing critical water scarcity. This environmental pressure is projected to drop crop yields by 10 to 15%, specifically affecting essential staples like wheat and rice. Agriculture alone still employs 140 million people. Even a small drop in yield creates a broad socioeconomic ripple effect that can slow down the entire national model. On the industrial side, the climate drag appears as a capital cost. Transitioning the manufacturing engine to cleaner energy requires massive investments in new infrastructure. Despite a surge in renewables, coal will likely still provide 30% of the energy mix by 2030, illustrating the difficulty of maintaining growth while reducing carbon dependence. Climate change acts as a consistent drag on the $7.3 trillion projection, draining resources from the most vulnerable sectors of the economy. Reaching the $7.3 trillion outcome depends on the state's ability to implement specific policy offsets for the friction we've identified. This matrix maps those frictions on the y-axis against the interventions required to neutralize them on the x-axis. To address the climate drag, the model requires a funding mechanism for the energy transition. A $20 per ton carbon tax provides the fiscal foundation to internalize environmental costs. This revenue supports $100 billion in green bonds, funding the 300 gigawatt solar capacity target required to power new manufacturing plants. To offset the 30 million jobs at risk from automation, the model indicates that R&D spending must reach 2.5% of GDP. This shift in capital is required to foster high-tech industries that can replace the roles lost to AI. This capital push must be paired with the active reskilling of 50 million workers through the Skill India mission to ensure the workforce remains compatible with these new industries. Finally, to keep credit flowing despite rising inequality, banking reforms and privatization of state banks are needed to resolve non-performing assets and support expansion. These policies are the structural requirements for the 2030 model. Without them, the growth engine risks stalling under the weight of its own systemic friction. The $7.3 trillion projection is a high-sensitivity model. Success depends entirely on balancing these growth vectors against rising systemic pressures. India must sustain technological acceleration while simultaneously managing the fallout of labor displacement and environmental drag. The coming decade is defined by this tension, whether the nation can harness a $7 trillion economy while absorbing the structural shocks it creates.